The auditorium lights at North Carolina A&T State University are bright, almost unforgiving, glinting off the polished wood of the stage. The room hums with a nervous energy, a mix of curiosity and defiance. On stage, a young, charismatic speaker from Turning Point USA, dressed in a sharp suit that feels more boardroom than Bible study, paces with a wireless microphone. His voice, amplified and confident, booms across the rows of students. He doesn't speak of contemplative prayer or quiet servitude. He speaks of spiritual warfare, of a nation under siege from wokeism and Marxist ideologies masquerading as social justice. He weaves together scripture and economic theory, quoting the Apostle Paul in one breath and Milton Friedman in the next. They will tell you that the system is rigged, he declares, his voice rising with practiced passion. They will sell you a gospel of victimhood. But I am here to tell you that the ultimate liberation is not found in a government program, but in Jesus Christ and the free market capitalism that allows you to fulfill your God-given potential. The air crackles with both fervent agreement and palpable skepticism. A pocket of students in the front rows, some wearing branded TPUSA faith t-shirts, erupts in applause. But further back, the reaction is more complex. A young woman with braids and a Howard University sweatshirt whispers to her friend, "Since when is capitalism a fruit of the Spirit?" An older man, likely a faculty member, sits with his arms crossed tightly, his expression a mask of stony analysis. This isn't just another campus political event. It's a meticulously branded spiritual crusade. The banners, the slick video presentations, the language of empowerment. It's all part of Turning Point USA's Faith Tour, a multi-campus initiative making a deliberate and well-funded push into a space many would consider ideologically hostile, the nation's historically black colleges and universities. To understand the gravity of this moment, one must first understand the organization at its center. Founded in 2012 by Charlie Kirk, Turning Point USA has become a dominant force in conservative youth activism, known for its aggressive campus presence and its unabashed fusion of conservative politics with a particular strain of evangelical Christianity. Their mission is to identify, educate, and organize students to promote the principles of freedom, free markets, and limited government. The creation of a dedicated faith division marks a strategic evolution, recognizing that for many Americans, political identity is inextricably linked to religious conviction. Their message is tailored for a generation grappling with economic anxiety and cultural polarization. It offers a clear, assertive theology of individualism. Personal responsibility is paramount, systemic injustice is downplayed in favor of personal sin, and national prosperity is framed as a sign of divine blessing. The language is one of spiritual patriotism, where defending the nation from perceived leftist threats becomes a righteous act. The tour's arrival on HBCU campuses, however, represents a new and audacious frontier. These institutions are not merely academic spaces. They are historical and cultural sanctuaries, born from the crucible of emancipation and forged in the fires of the civil rights movement. Their spiritual DNA is profoundly different from the one being preached from the TPUSA stage. The tension in the auditorium is more than just a simple disagreement over policy. It's a fundamental clash of theological worldviews, a collision of two different gospels. One, rooted in the collective Black experience, has historically viewed faith as the engine of social transformation and liberation oppressive systems. The other, now being presented with compelling force, frames faith as the key to individual success and liberation the existing system. The student murmurs and skeptical glances are not just reactions to a speaker. They are the visible tremors of a deep fault line being tested. Why this specific targeted outreach? Is it a genuine effort to engage in dialogue and find common ground? A sincere attempt at evangelism? Or is it a calculated political maneuver, an ideological Trojan horse designed to fracture the historical monolith of Black political and social thought by striking at its spiritual heart? What makes these historically Black institutions, steeped in a unique legacy of faith and activism, a target for such a focused campaign? From that charged auditorium, where a modern gospel of individualism is being preached, we must journey back in time, into the quiet, hallowed halls that gave these institutions their soul. We find ourselves not in a bustling event space, but in the hushed archives of Spelman College. Here, a student archivist, wearing white cotton gloves, carefully turns the brittle, yellowed page of a letter. It's a correspondence from 1883, written by Sophia B. Packard and Harriet E. Giles, the school's founders. They speak not only of teaching literacy and arithmetic, but of a profound, urgent mission to cultivate Christian womanhood in a world that had denied Black women their very humanity. They saw education and faith as two sides of the same coin of liberation. This artifact is not a relic, it is a mission statement, a testament to the spiritual bedrock upon which historically Black colleges and universities were built. For generations, HBCUs were more than academic centers. They were sanctuaries in a hostile nation. Born from the ashes of the Civil War, often with the support of abolitionist religious groups like the American Missionary Association, institutions like Howard, Fisk, Morehouse, and Tuskegee were founded with a dual purpose: intellectual emancipation and spiritual fortification. Their chapels served as crucibles for Black liberation theology, a place where the Bible was reclaimed from the slave master and reread through the lens of the oppressed. This was where faith ceased to be a tool for pacification and became the very engine of justice. The Exodus story was not an ancient myth. It was a living promise of deliverance from the modern-day pharaohs of Jim Crow. The fiery condemnations of injustice by the prophet Amos were not historical texts. They were direct indictments of discriminatory laws and economic exploitation. Jesus was not a distant, ethereal savior concerned only with the afterlife. He was a revolutionary figure who stood with the poor, the marginalized, and the dispossessed. This unique theological ecosystem was cultivated by generations of towering intellectual and spiritual figures. Consider Howard Thurman, the mystic and theologian whose book became a foundational text for the civil rights movement. Thurman, who served as dean of the chapel at Howard University, argued that the Christianity of the powerful and privileged was a distortion. He sought to uncover the religion of Jesus himself, a poor, non-Roman Jew from a marginalized group. For Thurman, faith had to provide answers to the central questions facing those whose backs are against the wall. It had to be a source of resilience against fear, hypocrisy, and hatred. This was not a theology of individual prosperity, but of collective survival and dignity. Or think of Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, the legendary president of Morehouse College and the spiritual mentor to a young Martin Luther King Jr. In his famous Tuesday morning chapel talks, Mays instilled in generations of Morehouse men the idea that their faith demanded not passive acceptance, but active, relentless engagement with the world's injustices. He preached a gospel of excellence and social responsibility, arguing that a faith that is not concerned with poverty, racism, and war is a dead faith. It was in this environment, under the tutelage of men like Mays, that Dr. King's own prophetic voice was honed, seamlessly weaving Gandhian nonviolence with the radical love ethic of the Black church. This historical tradition, therefore, stands in stark, almost irreconcilable contrast to the message being promoted by Turning Point USA. Where the HBCU tradition emphasizes communal responsibility and the concept of systemic sin, the idea that injustice can be embedded in the very structures of society, the TPUSA message focuses almost exclusively on personal sin and individual choice. Where Black liberation theology calls for a critical engagement with power, questioning and challenging economic and political systems, the conservative evangelicalism of the Faith Tour often demands a patriotic reverence for those same systems, viewing them as divinely ordained. This creates a profound theological dissonance. The very scriptures used for a century to demand social change are now being used to argue for the preservation of the status quo. The call for justice is being reframed as wokeism. The critique of economic inequality is being labeled Marxism. How does this historical legacy of communal, justice-oriented faith clash with a contemporary movement emphasizing individual enterprise and limited government intervention? And what happens to a student body when the spiritual language of their ancestors is used to promote a political vision that seems to contradict the very reason their institutions were founded? Building on that distinct theological foundation of communal justice, we now confront the modern-day ideological contest playing out in campus quads and student unions. The scene shifts to a coffee shop just off campus, the air thick with the smell of roasted coffee and the buzz of intense conversation. A small group of students is clustered around a table, their discussion animated and earnest. My pastor back home says your focus should be on your own walk with God and building wealth for your family, not protesting, says a freshman business major. He says that's how we truly uplift the community. A junior, a sociology major, with a well-worn copy of James Cone's in her lap, pushes back gently but firmly. But what if the systems are designed to stop us from building that wealth? Our faith has always been the thing that gave us the strength to challenge those systems. It's not an either-or. This dialogue, replayed in countless variations across HBCU campuses, is the heart of the matter. TPUSA's Faith Tour isn't merely about political affiliation, it's a strategic attempt to reframe what righteousness means for a new generation of Black Americans. By presenting a conservative evangelical worldview as the authentic expression of faith, it subtly but powerfully challenges the historical narrative that has long linked Black faith to progressive social action. This isn't happening in a vacuum. It taps into a complex and diversifying Black religious landscape. Over the past few decades, the influence of prosperity theology and non-denominational megachurches has grown, offering a message of personal empowerment, financial blessing, and moral traditionalism that resonates with many. For some students, particularly those who feel disconnected from the more overtly political expressions of traditional Black churches, the TPUSA message of individual piety and economic self-sufficiency can feel like a breath of fresh air, a way to be faithful without being political. Oral histories we've gathered from students reveal this spectrum. One student told us, "I believe in social justice, but sometimes it feels like that's all we talk about in chapel. I came here to get my degree and build a future." The TPUSA speaker talked about that, about my potential. However, critics, including many scholars of African American religion and longtime faculty at these institutions, see a more perilous dynamic at play. They argue this reframing risks detaching students from the very tradition of resilience and resistance that made their education possible. Dr. Anthea Butler, a prominent scholar of religion, has written extensively about the political aims of Christian nationalism, and movements like TPUSA Faith can be seen as an extension of this, an effort to co-opt the language of faith to serve a specific conservative political agenda. The battle is over the definition of core theological concepts. What is righteousness? In the prophetic tradition of the Black church, righteousness is inseparable from justice. It is a public, communal virtue that involves caring for the vulnerable and restructuring society to be more equitable. In the worldview presented by TPUSA, righteousness is often narrowed to private morality, personal piety, sexual ethics, and adherence to a specific set of doctrinal beliefs, with economic success seen as a righteous outcome. This theological debate has profound, real-world consequences that extend far beyond the campus gates. A shift toward a more individualistic, less structurally critical faith could have a significant impact on Black political engagement. The Black church has historically been the single most effective institution for voter registration and mobilization in the Black community. If its focus shifts from communal action to individual prosperity, will that mobilizing power wane? On economics, it presents a stark choice between the historical Black church's support for cooperative economics and social safety nets and the TPUSA-endorsed vision of unregulated capitalism and individual entrepreneurship. Ultimately, this is a struggle over the very definition of Black identity in America. Is that identity intrinsically linked to a shared history of struggle and a collective pursuit of justice, a story in which faith has been the central protagonist? Or can it be uncoupled from that history and redefined along the lines of individualism, nationalism, and free market principles? The questions being debated over coffee are not merely academic. They are shaping the future leaders of a community and, by extension, the nation. What does it mean for the future of Black faith when its historical interpretations are openly contested on its most sacred academic grounds? The answer is being written now in the hearts and minds of a new generation.